There comes a particular kind of tiredness that doesn't announce itself with heavy limbs or the urge to sleep. It settles more quietly, a dimming, the way a room grows darker, not because someone turned off the light, but because the day has simply gone on too long. You know this tiredness. It appears in the pause before you answer another late-night call, the familiar tightening in your chest when you hear the tremor in someone else's voice and already know you will stay awake for them. Again. It lives in the way you sit at the edge of your bed afterward, hands loosely resting, as if they've forgotten their purpose once the crisis has passed. And you wonder, not for the first time, why the world keeps coming to you as though you were built to absorb its weight. There is no anger in this weariness, only a slow, steady ache, the kind that grows from years of being the one who steadies everything around you. You rarely speak of it. You rarely even admit it to yourself. But you feel it. In the quiet moments, in the soft hum of the refrigerator in an empty kitchen, in the way your shoulders lower only when no one is watching. You have become the one people reach for, a lighthouse to their unending storms. And yet, the irony is that lighthouses never move. They stand where they are, fixed in place, so that others may find their way, even if the foundation beneath them trembles. You know the sensation of trying to hold steady while something inside you flickers. It's subtle at first, a small dimming, like a flame losing oxygen. You smile, you listen, you help, you reassure. But inside, the flame leans lower, stretching itself thin across the demands of others. There are moments when you try to breathe deeply, hoping the breath will restore something, but all it meets is that familiar hollowness, the space you emptied out to make room for everyone else's fears, their hopes, their endless wanting. And perhaps the heaviest part is how natural it has become, how easily you say, "It's fine," even when something inside you whispers that it's not. How you've mistaken being needed for being loved. Tonight, as you sit with this quiet exhaustion, you may not know what to do with it, but you can feel its truth. And in that truth, for a brief moment, the flame simply waits. There is a reason you give so much. It isn't random, and it isn't simply kindness. It's something more delicate, more hidden, almost like an old promise you don't remember making, yet have been keeping your whole life. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being useful was safer than being seen. That if you kept anticipating needs, smoothing rough edges, offering yourself before being asked, the world would have fewer reasons to turn away. You weren't taught this directly. It arrived through gestures, silences, and the small tremors of childhood moments where love seemed to lean on your ability to carry what others could not. So now, when someone hesitates or falters, you step in before the gap even forms. We do this, don't we? Movements rehearsed over years. You hear a sigh behind a closed door, and your heart leans toward it instinctively. You offer reassurance before anyone admits to fear. You fix the thing on the table, the loose screw, the crooked picture frame, not because it must be fixed, but because something inside you believes harmony is your responsibility. And beneath it all, there's a quieter truth we rarely name. The fear that if we stop giving, we might disappear. That without all this effort, all this tending, all this mending, the world might not orbit us in the same way. We confuse indispensability with love. We confuse overextension with connection. You've felt it in those moments when someone doesn't call back. The small pulse of worry. Did I do something wrong? Not because they owe you anything, but because a part of you measures your worth by whether someone needs you at that particular hour. Or that time you said, "I'm fine," when you were anything but, because admitting your own exhaustion felt like breaking a contract. the one where you show up strong so others can lean without hesitation. We learn to disappear gently, not all at once, but in soft, obedient pieces. A little less rest here, a little more effort there, until there is barely any space left for the person doing all the giving. And still, part of you feels guilty for even noticing this, as though recognizing your own depletion is an act of disloyalty. But here, in this quiet moment between breaths, something begins to shift. For the first time, you sense that a life spent holding others might be the very thing that keeps you from being held. There comes a moment, often quiet, often unintended, when the truth arrives not as a thought, but as a sensation. A small jolt under the ribs, a pause in the breath, a feeling that something you believed was noble has quietly turned against you. You notice it on an ordinary day. Someone asks for something simple, a favor you could do with your eyes half closed. You agree. Of course you do. But this time, as the word leaves your mouth, it feels heavy, as though you've placed another stone in a bag you didn't realize you were carrying. This is the inner shock, the recognition that your constant giving has begun to erode you, not because generosity is wrong, but because unbounded generosity is a slow undoing, the kind that moves through you like water wearing down a shoreline, gentle, steady, patient. You don't notice until the land beneath your feet is thinner than it used to be. You start to see the pattern, how your hands reach out before your mind has time to decide, how the room seems to tilt toward you whenever something needs lifting, how people have grown accustomed to your immediate yes, the way they rely on it, the way you've made it seem effortless, even when it costs you. And in this steady illumination, you realize something difficult. You've mistaken depletion for devotion. It's a hard truth to accept, a sad one, but also strangely relieving, because suddenly the exhaustion makes sense. Suddenly the late-night numbness, the early morning dread, the hollow ache after helping, all of it becomes coherent. It wasn't weakness, it was overextension, a body and a spirit stretched beyond their shape. You begin to understand that even virtues need edges, even kindness needs form, even love needs a doorway that can close so that the inside is allowed to rest. A tree cannot give shade if it's been cut to the root. A river cannot nourish if it's been drained to mud. And you cannot save everyone if saving them means losing yourself. This is not punishment, it is clarity, the soft, undeniable kind that brightens a dim room without a sound. And as you stand inside this new light, something becomes unmistakably clear. A life without boundaries is a life without breath. There is a shift that happens long before you speak a word. It begins inside you, almost imperceptibly, a subtle settling, as though something that once leaned outward finally leans back into itself, not in defiance, not in withdrawal, but in a quiet understanding of what your life can no longer hold. You don't announce it. You don't rehearse explanations. There is no confrontation, no need to convince anyone of anything. Instead, a soft clarity rises, the kind that feels like standing on the threshold of your own home after a long journey, hand resting on the doorframe, knowing you're finally allowed to enter. Boundaries, you realize, aren't walls. They are doorways. Places where one thing ends and another begins. Places where you choose what crosses and what stays outside. This understanding doesn't roar. It doesn't harden your voice. It simply changes the way your hand moves when the phone buzzes late at night. Where once you would have lifted it immediately, ready to absorb whatever was asked, now you watch the screen glow and then dim again. The phone becomes just an object, not an alarm bell, not a command, Sometimes you turn it face down. Sometimes you let it ring once, then fall quiet. And in that small act, that tiny silent refusal, something inside you exhales. You start to notice how often you've filled the silence for others, and how rarely you've let silence hold you. So now you let it. You sit in a room with the curtains moving gently in the evening breeze, and the world feels less demanding, less urgent, less entitled to your constant participation. You begin to understand that refusal is not cruelty, it is care, but directed inward for once. A care that says, my presence is meaningful, and therefore I must protect it. A care that recognizes how easily we can be emptied by the expectations we never questioned. People may feel the shift. Some will reach, waiting for the old version of you to return. But your silence, calm, steady, unforced, becomes its own statement. I no longer trade my peace for belonging. You do not owe an explanation for choosing yourself. You simply step back, step inward, step home. And in the soft dimness of that moment, as the last vibration of the unanswered phone fades into the room, the air settles, and the house quiets. There is a kind of love that doesn't move toward people. It doesn't rush in. It doesn't bend itself into smaller shapes just to fit the needs of others. It stands still, steady, luminous, like a lantern placed in the window of a quiet house at night. This house becomes your metaphor, not a fortress, not a retreat, but a place where warmth is kept with care. Its doors open and close with intention. Its rooms hold light the way cupped hands hold water, gently, without spilling. You begin to feel that your distance is not absence. It is the doorway between your inner life and the world, a threshold where every step must be chosen rather than assumed. When you step back, you are not turning away. You are tending the flame inside the house so that it does not flicker out. This kind of silence is not cold. It has temperature, softness, breath. It feels like walking through your own home in early morning, the wooden floor cool beneath your feet, the quiet settling around you like a shawl. There is nothing harsh here, nothing taken, nothing demanded. You start to understand that when you pull away from someone's need, you aren't withholding love. You are simply refusing to let your lantern burn itself empty, because an empty lantern cannot guide anyone, not even you. So you place it on the windowsill. You keep the flame slow and steady. You let its glow fill the space around you, not reaching, not chasing, just being. And in that soft light, you begin to see how your absence can offer something your presence never could. Calm, clarity, an unspoken reminder that each person must learn to stand in their own darkness until their eyes adjust. Sometimes this is the greatest compassion, letting people find their own steps without your hands holding them. Allowing yourself to rest so deeply that your stillness becomes an offering, not a withdrawal. Some will misunderstand. Some will want the old you. But the house inside you knows better. It knows what must be protected. It knows that your quiet is not a closing, but a keeping. And as you sit within that gentle glow, you realize the most peaceful truth. When you stop pouring out, your love finally becomes whole. There comes a moment when you stop trying to make sense of it all, not because you've reached some great understanding, but because the need to understand has finally loosened its grip. Peace arrives this way, not as an answer, but as the quiet removal of a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying for years. You can feel the shift inside you. It's subtle, like exhaling after holding your breath for too long. All the explanations you once rehearsed, the justifications, the softened words, the careful ways you tried to make your boundaries gentle for others, they simply fall away. Not with bitterness, not with triumph, just with the calm certainty that you owe no one a map of your inner life. You look back at the path, the fatigue that began as a whisper, the recognition that rose like dawn, the slow reclaiming of space, the steady light of silence, and you realize how far you've walked, not in distance, but in willingness. Willingness to let go of who you were told to be. Willingness to stop holding together what wanted to fall apart. Willingness to choose yourself without apology. There is no drama in this release, no scene, no declaration, just the gentle closing of an internal door, a soft click that only you can hear. And in that small sound, years of tension dissolve. This is the strange grace of letting go. You expect a rush, a flare of emotion, something grand. But what comes is a wide, quiet emptiness, the good kind. The kind that feels like walking into a room after a long absence and finding it exactly as you left it, waiting for you without judgment. You begin to realize that peace never required permission. It never asked you to explain yourself. It simply waited for you to stop explaining to everyone else. And now, standing here with the open space around you, you feel lighter. Not because anything was given to you, but because you finally stopped giving away what kept you whole. There is nothing left to defend, nothing left to prove, just the soft, steady truth of your own presence. And with this, the journey completes itself, not with a lesson, but with a breath. You are not leaving them. You are returning to yourself.